Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's get to it. Hey Jason, how would you work the push press in as a replacement for the overhead press in a program with high squat frequency such as Texas method? You mentioned before that this could be a problem for the push press. Is the Texas method even considered a program with high squat frequency? Yeah, the Texas method has a pretty high squat frequency. I wouldn't call it really high, but it's fairly high. The main issue, though, you're looking at is more the volume. Like the frequency and volume combined is a problem when you start putting in the push press. If you're replacing the strict overhead press with the push press in a program that has high volumes and frequency of squatting, that's really your problem because it puts a lot of extra recovery and work and explosive training onto your legs. And if you're doing a lot of squat volume, that can be problematic for recovery for a lot of people. But with something like the Texas method, you're probably okay switching it straight across. What I would look for is extra soreness in your legs, problems not being able to follow the progression in the program the way it's written, and particularly on the push press and the squat because you're not recovering, the legs aren't recovering enough from what you're doing. And if that's the case, you might need to try to reduce the squat volume just a little bit to compensate. The frequency should still be okay. It's just that the total volume and workload sometimes can be problematic. Or in some cases, if that's what you're doing, you might have to slightly reduce the progression rate on the squat as well. But generally, reducing volume is going to be your main go-to for that as far as just facilitating the extra recovery necessary. Because the thing that you need to remember is that if you're already squatting at a decently high volume and frequency, you're probably going to get the additional leg stimulation from the push press that you might have been getting from the extra volume from the squat. So at a certain point, you can afford to reduce the squat volume just a little bit in a program to facilitate using the push press. Because again, you have to remember the push press isn't thought of as a primary lower body exercise, but it does add explosive training and workload to your lower body. So if you think of it as an assistance exercise for your squat, it should be clear that you can actually replace some of your squat volume with it and still get some benefits, some additional leg stimulation as a result of it. And that might be the best way to recover from it. Just remember, it obviously isn't going to replace the squat for you in an athletic program, but it can replace some of the squat volume and still get the same extra metabolic fatigue and even the explosive training that you would have gotten from the extra squat work you're doing. So it's just a matter of balancing these things out and understanding its role as an accessory to the squat movements and realizing that you might have to slightly reduce the volume and workload on the primary exercise to facilitate the recovery from the additional assistance exercises. And just look at it from that perspective. All right, next question. Do you feel that males physically peak in their late 20s, a compromise between youth hormones, muscle maturity, and training knowledge? I haven't made any muscle gains since my mid-20s. Should I still be making gains in my 30s? Or is the reality we just try to hold on to what we can as we age? Even one of the most gifted lifters I know who was benching 187 kilos age 26, now at age 35, he can just hit 160 kilograms on a good day. Yeah, this is one of those questions that almost deserves its own video. I will probably revisit this coming up here soon just because the question is fantastic. So yeah, I might screenshot this for its own video later, but the truth is, for a lot of guys, no, you're not going to be able to progress in your 30s. A lot of guys can if their lifestyle and their hormones allow for it. Meaning, if they peaked in their 20s, because you're going to peak in your 20s. If you start lifting when you're 18 years old or younger, you're going to peak in your mid-20s. Guys need to understand that. Drug-free gains slow down year after year after year. They have diminished returns year after year. You're going to be lucky to get 50% of the gains you got the year before. Well, if you make gains for 5 or 6 years straight, everything is going to slow down. You reach your 30s and your hormone levels start going down a little bit. Your connective tissue starts slowing down in its recovery a little bit. You're going to struggle to make any gains. That's just normal. But the thing that you have to realize, 160 kilogram bench press is fantastic for 35. That's downright amazing. So when you look at it from the perspective of, yes, an athlete or lifter who peaks in their 20s, and who got brutally strong and put on a lot of muscle, if they can keep 95% of what they had in their 30s, they're still going to be in the top 1% of lifters in their 30s. So the way to look at it is, yeah, guys who start later are still going to progress further then, but guys who choose to stay drug-free, particularly guys who don't go on TRT into their 30s, yeah, you might regress a little bit in your 30s. But if you reach pretty much your maximum in your peak in your 20s and you can still maintain the best possible in your 30s, even if you're not making gains anymore, you're still going to be bigger and stronger than 95% of 20 somethings who work out in the gym. You're still going to be better than them. They're not going to be able to hang with you. So is it really that big of a deal if you regress a little bit as you age? Not really. Now, are a few people so genetically gifted that they will continue to make progress in their 30s and 40s, even if they did amazing all through their 20s? Yeah, but they're genetic outliers. They're statistical outliers. Are guys who go on pretty hefty doses of drugs going to be able to surpass that? Oftentimes, yes, unless, of course, they use similar amount of drugs in their 20s, and then they might find that they're still going to regress a little bit. So it's going to vary a lot from person to person. But if you peaked in your 20s, which is normal for someone who started fairly young, and you peak in your mid to late 20s as far as your strength and muscle mass and everything, even if you regress a little bit, you're still going to be healthier, fitter, stronger, bigger than most people who work out. So is it really that big of a deal? Not really. You're still kicking ass, so who cares? All right, next question. Do you think drug-tested athletes will ever get advanced enough that nobody can get around it? And would that be a good or bad for sports? All right, do I think it'll ever advance to that point? Probably not, because any technological advances that go towards drug testing will also be at similar levels of technological advances and medical advances that could be used by medical doctors and scientists who help the athletes beat the test and who develop new drugs for them. So is it possible? Yes. Would I bank on it? Probably not. I think it's more likely that people will always stay ahead of the testing. And to answer the other question, this will actually further cover my answer to the first part. Is it a good or a bad thing for sports? I think that for sports itself, as far as keeping people interested in sports and having an actual audience and fan base, I think successful drug testing is the worst possible thing you could do to keep sports alive. People will go back to performing inferior to what they are right now in every single professional sport in the world. Nobody wants to see people run slower, jump shorter, lift less weight, run out of steam faster, or perform lower than they were doing 20, 30, or 50 years ago. No fan wants to see that. You want to kill sports? You want to have people walk away and say sports suck and they don't want to watch this shit anymore? Have everybody stop performing as well as they were doing 30 years ago, which was all drugs. It was obviously genetics, training, everything else, but drugs played a role in that. You take those people off those drugs and all of a sudden no one performs like they were doing during people's childhood or during their father's childhood. Do you think anybody really wants to watch that? No, you will kill sports dead. That'll be the end of it. No one's going to care anymore about sports if that happens. Everyone wants to see supermen and superwomen. They want to see freaks. They want to see people who can run faster, jump higher, and play longer than anyone has ever done before. And since our genetics are the same, and we've already had selective breeding programs for this, actually in some cases all the way back to the ancient world, the genetics aren't going to improve. Our training knowledge that we obtain at this point in every generation yields us such a small difference that it's barely statistically significant. It's there, but it's tiny. It's microscopic fine-tuning at this point. So the only answer for people to continue to do that is going to be stronger drugs. And actually getting rid of the drugs that set all those old records is certainly not going to help people set new ones. So, no, it's the worst thing in the world for sports. And accordingly, since there's a lot of money and a lot of political influence involved with sports, I think that political influence and that money is going to affect the quality of the testing methods, and it's going to affect the availability and the research money that goes into making sure that the drugs exist that athletes can pass with. So that stuff is going to have a twofold impact on that as well. So it's not just going to be about the latter. The people who have money and influence involved in sports know it would kill sports. They have to know it would kill sports. They're going to make sure that athletes are going to continue to perform well enough to draw in an audience and keep an interest. And anyone who thinks otherwise is being incredibly naive. All right, next question. Any advice or cues to help incorporate upper back rounding in the deadlift? I used to pull with straight back and have a hard time actually rounding it now when I want to. Thank you for this one. This is going to be the easiest question I've had all night. How to get upper back rounding or thoracic rounding. Keep your neck neutral and keep your chin pointed down at the start. And so keep your chin pointed slightly down. Keep a neutral neck and do not let your neck move at any point during the deadlift, and you will find that thoracic rounding will become immediate, and it will become easy, and it will become second nature. It will just happen automatically once you get to a heavy weight if you can do that. So chin down slightly, keep your neck neutral. Imagine there's a steel rod through your neck. If you still bend your neck, imagine there's a titanium rod through your neck. If you still bend your neck, have someone who's spotting you slap you every time you bend your neck. And about the 5th time they slap the shit out of you, you'll stop doing it. That's a bit of a joke, but I had to do that with a friend of mine, as he actually asked me to. And after about the 3rd time I slapped him, he quit doing it. So that's your solution if imagining a steel rod through your neck doesn't work. But your neck shouldn't be bending on your deadlift. And if you can keep a neutral neck and your chin down slightly, you will find thoracic rounding just happens automatically once you get to a substantial enough weight. All right, next question. Is there any benefit to stretching in terms of recovery and so on, on the point of being flexible enough for the lifts you are doing? God, I got tongue-tied there. All right, that depends on how flexible we're talking about. I would say everyone out there, for overall health and health of your joints and your connective tissue, you need a baseline level of flexibility that can be obtained with stretching. It's not a very large amount, to be honest, so it's not a huge amount. And as far as the rest goes, the rest is going to be very sport specific and activity specific. You need to personally analyze the various activities that you're going to partake, your weightlifting, any sports that you play in, whether recreationally or competitively, and any strenuous physical activity that you do. You need to assess the amount of range of motion that you need for that, and stretch and do mobility work only to the point that you need to keep your joints and connective tissue healthy and to not pull anything for the physical activities that you personally partake in. And the reason I state that it needs to be specific, there are many physical activities, including sports, again, both recreationally and competitively, that hypermobility will reduce performance and increase your chances of injury. So you need to figure out how much that is. If you're going to do barbell squats in competition, you need to find out how deep you need to go, and don't worry about being more mobile than another inch than that. Shoulder mobility is an even bigger one. You need to find all the activities that you do, whether it's golf or baseball or rock climbing or whatever activities that you want to partake in, and you need to find out how much shoulder mobility you need by looking at those activities, photographing them, feeling yourself through those ranges of motion, and develop a strength mobility and even stretching to that range of motion and just a hair further. Because again, on anything that requires an explosive movement, like such as a golf swing or a pitch or a throw, hypermobility can actually injure your shoulders when you're swinging or throwing something with maximum force as hard as you can. So again, there's very much such a thing as hypermobility for very active people that you do need to be aware of. So yes, you need to stretch up to the point that you need for all of your activities, and that is what's going to keep you healthiest. It's about not getting too inflexible, but not having hypermobility either, because too much either direction beyond what you need for your activities is what predisposes you to injury. And I don't mean with just weight training that you shouldn't train most of your stuff through a full range of motion, because that will keep your joints healthy. But you do need to be aware that there is such a thing as hypermobility for a lot of activities, and you're going to have to assess that on a case-by-case basis. And you'll probably find whatever activities you train in specifically or are going to do, that there will be guides out there of some type to help you find roughly what you're going to need there. There's a lot of material out there, but you do need to make sure that you kind of have the right ranges. You don't want to be too far either direction. Now, most people are going to be too inflexible, and that's often the case. So that's why stretching becomes such a big deal. But people who train regularly, oftentimes that completely goes away, and they don't need to worry about additional mobility once they've established a good baseline. And so once you get to that point, you do need to assess it on a case-by-case basis. All right, next question and last question of the week. Do you think new body technology such as augmentations will have an effect on competitive sports or sports in general in the future? I think the answer is absolutely yes, 100% chance this will happen in the future, barring some sort of technological bottleneck that sets us back generations or puts us into a new dark age. Barring something like that, At the rate technology is increasing, the interest in cybernetics and various augmentations, yes, I think surgeries, augmentations, and cybernetics are going to become a factor in sports in the future, very possibly within our lifetimes. I would bank on it happening in our lifetimes at this point. And when that happens, who knows how extreme it's going to go? That part, I don't think any of us could predict. It could go as far as our wildest imagination allows and maybe even further, but it might also be kept in check to some extent by regulations and rules. I suspect that once this starts to become an issue in sports, we're going to see rules written in sports, and I think you're going to start seeing individual divisions that are going to be something like all human versus cybernetic divisions and augmentation divisions like that. I think it will probably go that way one day, just like we have raw versus equipped powerlifting and some hybrids in between. I think you're going to see a lot of that in sports. What is that going to do to sports in general? Which one is going to be more popular? I really can't say, but I'm going to guess, knowing human nature and knowing how people want to see the limits pushed, I have a feeling that if that happens, that the cybernetic enhanced sports are probably going to be more popular, and I think they're probably going to be a lot more popular with younger generations, with younger sports fans. Just due to the progressive nature of it. That's what I think is going to happen with it. But, what's really going to happen, we'll have to wait and see. Is it a good or a bad thing? I really don't know. But I would lean in the direction of it being a good thing, as long as it doesn't hurt us as people in the long term. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.